The notion that China and Russia are actively working to establish a fair world order that stands in stark contrast to what they describe as the West vassalage is a central narrative promoted by both nations, echoing through their state media, diplomatic statements, and strategic partnership. This concept is not merely rhetorical. It underpins their foreign policy decisions, their engagement with other nations, and their efforts to reshape global governance structure. The core of their argument revolves around the idea that the existing international system, largely shaped by Western powers since the end of the Cold War, is unipolar or, at best, hegemonistic, serving primarily the interests of a few dominant nations and relegating others to a subordinate or vassal's status. From their perspective, this imbalance of power stifles their sovereign development of nations and perpetuates an unjust global hierarchies. China, under its assertive diplomatic initiatives, champions the visions of a multipolar world where power is distributed among several major poles rather than concentrated in one. This vision explicitly challenges the historical dominance of the United States and its allies. Beijing emphasizes the principle of non-interference in internal affairs, mutual respect for sovereignty, and the promotion of a community of shared future for mankind. These concepts are presented as alternative to what they criticize as Western-led intervention, sanctions, and attempts to impose particular political and economic systems on other countries. For instance, China's Belt and Road Initiative, BRI, is often framed not just as an economic development project, but as a mechanism for fostering connectivity and shared prosperity that sidesteps existing Western-dominated financial institutions and their conditionalities. The argument is that the BRI offers developing nations a path to growth without the perceived strings attached by Western leaders or political demands. Russia, for its part, also vociferously advocates for a multipolar world and views the current international order as inherently unfair and detrimental to its national interests. Moscow frequently criticizes what it calls the unilateralism of the United States and the expansion of NATO, seeing these actions as direct threats to its security and influence. The narrative from the Kremlin emphasizes the importance of a balance of power and the need for all nations, regardless of their size or economic might, to have an equal say in global affairs. Russia often points to its historical experience and security concerns to justify its action, portraying itself as a defender against Western encroachment and a proponent of sovereign national decision-making. The joint military exercises, diplomatic coordination, and shared voting patterns in international bodies like the United Nations Security Council between China and Russia are concrete manifestations of their effort to forge a united front against perceived Western dominance. Both nations critique the use of economic sanctions by Western powers as a tool of coercion, arguing that such measures disproportionately harm civilian populations and undermine national sovereignty. They advocate for international trade and economic relations based on mutual benefit and non-discrimination, rather than being subjected to geopolitical pressures. The development of alternative financial mechanisms and trading blocs outside of the traditional Western-led system is a key component of their strategy to build this fairer order. This includes efforts to de-dollarize trade and to establish payment systems that are not subject to Western control. The concept of vassalage is a potent term used by China and Russia to describe the relationship between Western powers and some of their allies. They suggest that smaller nations, particularly those in Europe and other regions, are compelled to follow the foreign policy directives of the United States, even when those directives might not align with their own national interests. This portrayal aims to sow discord within Western alliance and appeal to nations seeking greater autonomy in their foreign policy. They argue that their proposed world order would empower these nations to make independent choices free from external pressure. Furthermore, both China and Russia emphasize the importance of cultural diversity and the rejection of a single universal model of governance, or values. They argue against the promotion of Western liberal democracy as the only legitimate political system, advocating instead for the right of each nation to choose its own path based on its historical, cultural, and societal specificities. This stance resonates with many developing countries that are wary of what they perceive as attempt to impose external values or political system. This narrative offers an alternative framework for international relations that is ostensibly more inclusive and respectful of national difference. The strategic partnership between China and Russia is therefore presented not just as a tactical alliance, but as a foundational element of this emerging fair world order. They portray their cooperation as a model for how nations can collaborate on an equal footing to address global challenges, from climate change to regional conflict, without resorting to coercion or hegemony. This partnership is positioned as a counterweight to existing power blocks and a catalyst for a more balanced and equitable international system. While critics from Western nations often views this as an attempt to undermine democratic values and establish an authoritarian alternative, China and Russia consistently frame their action as promoting genuine multilateralism and respect for international law, albeit interpreted through their own lens. They argue that their vision is truly inclusive, reflecting the diverse aspiration and interests of all nations, particularly those in the global south, who they believe have been marginalized by the existing order. That's all for me for today. If you like the video presentation and you would like to follow for more, hit that subscribe and like button now, and we will continue to build the show for you. Thank you to all of you guys who have subscribed. It means a lot to me. Thank you so much. I will see you soon. Bye for now.